Man, that intro is just killing. I love it.
Wait. Before you start, I have to tell you this. I have to tell everyone this. Somebody the other day told me that the new intro looked like a tail of the tape from like a UFC match and that you and I were about to face off. Take that for what it is and drop a comment on who you think would win, please.
I kind of like that idea. That's good. Based on my we were talking about my investment yesterday. I'm thinking that might be a good idea. It's a good way to get some of my investment back.
Oh, anyways, blood money. There you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to AVX Live. I'm Joe Gilderson with Corporate Audio Visual, and I am joined by my counterpart and co-host, Mr. Ryan Finch.
Hello. And by the way, your co-host is on Wi-Fi today, so if at any point I disappear, just know that I broke the cardinal sin of broadcasting. So sorry, everybody, but it's snowing out, and I didn't feel like going to my typical spot. But we're going to make this work.
All right. Looks like I'll be flying solo again. Anyways, welcome to episode 43. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had some really cool conversations. Last week, we spoke with Elena Rivera-Cheek from Copy and Art. And the previous week, we spoke with Brett Tracy and Tim Morin from Nationwide Video. And we're trying to balance off all the different businesses and industries and topics and guests. And today we're going to address the new way of working and the new way of managing and recruiting for 2022. Ryan, why don't you tell people how they can follow us and watch us?
Well, that's a good point. While my connection is still good here, why don't you come check us out on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube Live. We're going to be doing this every Wednesday, 1 o'clock, just like it is Wednesday at 1 o'clock right now. And while you're there on one of those channels, if you drop us a comment, you can leave a question, a comment, anything. We'll bring you into the show. And, and if it is a question, we'll answer it right then and there. That's the beauty of doing it live, right? Joe, did I get everything? Oh, I'm sorry. The most important thing, smash the subscribe button, like, comment, share, subscribe, all the above. Super helpful. Much appreciated. And again, Wednesdays, 1 o'clock, you can find us here live.
That was pretty good. I think you hit your checkbox.
I hit my checklist. There's only 3, so
there's only 3. 4. I mean, you almost blew it, but you still hung in there, so that's pretty good. Thanks. We got you while your Wi-Fi is on.
Deal.
So listen, I think it's time to get started. So today we're going to be speaking with a friend and longtime colleague, Ron Senatore. Ron Senatore is a certified business performance advisor with Insperity, a leading provider of human resources and business performance solutions for America's best businesses. In his role, Ron works closely with business owners and company leadership nationwide to understand the needs of their businesses and identify their opportunities for increased growth and profitability. Since joining Insperity in 1999, Ron has helped more businesses than any other advisor in the history of the company. I mean, we're bringing in the big dogs today. As a result, he has earned honors as the Business Performance Advisor of the Year, a record 4 times. Ron is based in the tri-state area, and he partners with business leaders to identify areas where they can maximize their organizational success and eliminate their administrative headaches. Ron's a big sports fan, even though he cheers for the wrong teams, and a great family man. Please welcome Ron Senatore.
Hey, gentlemen. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for the very professionally written and scripted introduction. Pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for letting me participate, Joe and Ryan.
Absolutely. Great to have you.
I'm not sure if you noticed, but we got the good sports teams behind me here.
If people didn't know you were from the great state of Massachusetts, they would just ironically think, based upon recent history, that you're just a front runner. But we've been friends for almost 20 years, so I could vouch for your credibility.
Well, I do appreciate that. This is somewhat of an unusual format for us to communicate in and have a discussion. So we appreciate you taking some time with us today.
Absolutely.
So why don't we start off? What the hell does Insperity do? And what's a business performance advisor? Like, those are big words.
Fancy terms, right? Okay. So, I'll let me introduce Insperity in kind of a simplified manner. So the way I've always kind of introduced it in an elevator pitch per se is it's an organization that has the capability to serve as a single source solution for the procurement, the administration, and the assurance of compliance that surrounds the people part of a business. That sounded as fancy as Joe's introduction. So let me put it more layman's.
We're going to need to dumb that down a little bit.
Yeah, let's make it light and simple, right? When you think about operating and owning a business, the market that I've been blessed to have been a part of and serve and support for the past 23 years are small to medium-sized companies that most commonly employ less than 150 employees. Insperity is an organization to put in proximity, serves and supports about 11,000 businesses across the United States in endless verticals: for-profit, nonprofit, public, private companies. But putting a denomination on that 11,000, you've got about 67% of those companies employ less than 150. And they average out to about 36 to 42 employees on any given day. So we're thinking about the privately held, most commonly, individually held, sometimes family-owned business. And so each of those companies in their respective industries and verticals, they have a product, a service, a solution, a technology that they've, in essence, take pride in. And part of taking pride in it is having brand recognition and brand awareness. And to create a successful brand and brand awareness, the first of all is you have to be credible in what you present. So, the product and service and solution. And then how do you monetize it? How do you, as a business owner, you want to take pride in it, but you went into business in many cases to develop, a product and service that generates revenue that you can be profitable by, hopefully. And then once you understand the financials around that product, service, and solution, you need to understand how you're going to sell and market it. How do people find out, who corporate AV is and who, Ron Senatore is, for that matter, and in Insperity. So, from that perspective, why don't you define a sales and marketing effort? Well, we're all in the business of service, right? So how do we deliver a high level of service that allows us to be able to be recognized as a category of one provider? And then you need technology to bring it together, right? Those are the foundations of every business. But the reality of it is your execution is only as good as the people that you put around them to execute those aspects of business. So what Insperity is an organization that really simplifies the employer's responsibility as it relates to the employer-employee aspect of the business. So from that perspective, when I think about it, kind of tie it together, there's a transactional aspect. Businesses go to market and they procure products and services that are required and essential of them as an organization, from payroll administration to workers' compensation to health and welfare benefits. And they do that in an individual manner. The foundation for our business, to keep this light, was to aggregate businesses together. And then as a result, they can get a better return on the investment they make in their direct cost expense. Beyond that, which I'm sure we're going to talk more about, is what's now become more from a strategic sense. How do we as employers define ourselves in terms of human capital management, human capital development? And so Insperity has an equal focus on allowing companies that typically do not have an HR department and HR resource to leverage the talent and technology we have to, in essence, create that experience without making the capital investment. So that's the general sense of what we provide to the market that we serve. What I get a chance to do, and really been blessed, is in my time here, I've met thousands and thousands and thousands of businesses, primarily here in the Northeast, but certainly over the years it's expanded. And I get a chance to live vicariously through entrepreneurs. I try to teach the next generation of Insperitans, as we call them, that what you don't realize is that as an entrepreneur, you take risk every single day. You wake up in the middle of the night. You worry how payroll is going to get funded, where the next, the contract's going to come, how to replace the contract that I lose. The beauty of what I've had a chance to do is I've been a part of a company that's now a $7 billion in revenue, publicly traded company on the New York Stock Exchange. So I never had to take that risk from a standpoint, but I've lived through small business owners and learned from small business owners. And, I think, as a result of doing it in a consistent manner with a high level of integrity, I've earned the right to be considered a trusted advisor and a valued resource to many companies in small to medium-sized businesses throughout the country.
Well, that's a real mouthful right there. But
well, you knew before it started what was going to happen.
I know I did know that. Yes. But I guess many people would go into business like let's just take ourselves. we're going into it because we want to help people with communicate and help them with their events. And it's kind of a little piece of show business. And, we're in it for all of that. I would tell you that the least enjoyable parts of my job end up being administrative and HR management, following all the rules, knowing what the rules are, which is almost impossible. And especially in a state like New York, I know California is probably a little worse, but still
not far behind anymore.
Well, those are the things that in general, I know I don't really want to have to know everything about. So that's why we look towards Insperity to try to help us be a little more educated in that area.
Wow. I mean, Ron, do you often get that your work is the least favorite part of entrepreneurs' business?
Yeah, I mean, without question. I mean, people went in, I think people who are entrepreneurs are, individualists in the sense that they've stood up for themselves and, they've learned through knowledge, through experiences of working through organizations and taking the best and worst of those experiences and then identifying, how they would do things in a different manner. Sometimes different isn't always better. And certainly we see countless entrepreneurs who feel that way, who take the risk and fail. But, many entrepreneurs that I've been a part of, that they took the risk, they failed, but they persevered and they reinvented themselves and they took those experiences and carried it forward. But one thing is that, Ryan, to your point is, you think about what we've lived through just in the last, 2 years alone, putting the people side a part of it, right? The disruptions in our personal lives, the disruption in our professional lives, our inability to live the lives that we've had. The last thing that people want is a greater responsibility, a greater distraction, and a greater risk. And yes, the pandemic was certainly a health matter. There's no health crisis per se. But it also became, kind of an eye-opening experience to being an employer in the people part of the business, and so I'm sure we'll get more into that. But yeah, I could tell you real quick, I actually sat across from a gentleman one time, never forget this. We started talking about some of the things that Joe conveyed and, what we'd call kind of pain points. And the gentleman looked me in the face. He's like, I want to tell you, I want to punch you in the face right now. I was like, why do you want to punch me in the face? He's like, because you're aggravating me because you're talking about everything that I hate and despise about being a business owner.
Wow.
Okay? It kind of was like that scene. You ever watched the movie Step Brothers? I just want to punch you in the face.
Punch me in the face. I was thinking, you're using a lot of big words right now. You're using a lot of big words right now. I'm going to take that as disrespect.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, that's it's a tough way to look at it. Unfortunately, is feeling like some people may want to punch you in the face. Hopefully, that's only a few. A few of your clients. I'm sure I have clients that want to punch me in the face, but for different reasons. Only a few, though. Only a few. So let me ask you this. You had mentioned you're typically focusing on small to medium sized businesses. I would insinuate there. You mentioned also that they don't typically have large internal HR departments. So is it that your focus is more for the groups that just don't have the resources? Do you have a side of your business that helps those that do have internal HR resources?
Yeah.
And it kind of a mix of service may change. Is that the idea?
Yeah, I'll answer it this way. And Ryan, your question is I find it intriguing because and I'm going to have to believe I say this. You were a wee boy back in 1998, 99, 2000.
That's true.
Had we met early on in my career here, when the question was asked about whether if an organization had an internal resource, we'll name whatever the person is as an HR generalist. And you have to think about it for most smaller organizations in our core market. Think about a company like your own. You can't. Two things. Number one is historically the business owner couldn't justify the expense of carrying the internal headcount, right? And not only the internal headcount, but the expense that comes along with it, the fringe factor. I've got to pay benefits and workers' comp and payroll. That's another 21 to 25%. And then, Joe has the internal person, and then we have to pay the payroll company. We've got to pay the benefit broker and say, look, I just can't justify the expense. It's not a direct revenue producing function, right? There are certain companies. So how do those small businesses then and to this day do it? It's the business owner himself or herself taking on the responsibility. And in time, maybe they, find a place where they can support a CFO, and the CFO, Joe, says, listen, I'm done with this. Sally Ann, you take this now, right? But the biggest difference that we find, first of all, in the core market, the smaller businesses, is it's become too much. Some of the things Joe touched on. If you're, what's occurred, businesses that were brick and mortar businesses where people gathered together every day, that, especially in the professional services and the technology community, the nonprofit community, the financial services, I would say that making that statement as being a pure bricks and mortar business is something that will never be the same again, right? You're not going to convince people to be in an office 5 days a week, nor do you want to, because the reality is you can hire talent throughout the country and effectively use mediums like this to communicate and engage each other, not only internally, but externally as well, right? To the companies that have a team, Ryan, to your direct question, or have a person, right? The question you ask yourself as a business leader is, what is my expectation of that person, right? So do I want that person where I am offloading the transactional administration? I'm doing unemployment claims, workers' comp audits, COBRA administration. Or do I really want that person to be part of my leadership team? So as the management team sits in a room and talks about the finance, the sales, the marketing, the technology, Ron is in the room as the HR consultant or the HR business partner and saying, well, let's think about, if we go this direction, do we have the right talent, or do we have the right compensation plan that's going to drive the revenue goals that you expect? So I think the fundamental difference that I've come to see is that from the employer's perspective, the idea of a robust department with a multitude of headcount, it has gone by past. And what you're finding is the ability for a company to recognize, I still need somebody, especially when you're north of that 100 employee count, but I need somebody, but I can surround that person with talent and technology so that they're effective without making a larger capital investment.
That makes sense. Things have certainly changed in the time that you've been there. I can only imagine the countless ways. Mm-hmm. It's funny because I know that from our side especially, but I know from everybody I've talked to, other business owners, HR and how that's managed has really been at the forefront of the conversation in 100 different ways over the last 2 years. So I guess, how do you think the pandemic changed the way your clients manage their staff?
Yeah. Joe, the first, and I'm going to say this, it's a little bit generational in my response, right? I think we've had to move away from the definition of how trust was defined, right? Trust in my, I'll say this, I'll be 50 shortly. My mentality as a leader, for the most part, going into the pandemic was, if I didn't see you, I didn't believe you were effectively working as hard as you should to produce the results that we expect, right? And that draws from my own personal mentality and principles that I grew up upon. Well, that, whether we wanted to adapt to where society was moving, right? Because there was a natural trend to have more of a work-life balance, but this just amplified it. Everyone had to move towards more of a trust-based relationship and do so in a manner there. We had to feel that these people who we had hired, who came qualified, who went through our selection and interview process, and I say ours, meaning any business, that we hired them because we believed they were credible and not to be babysat, but individuals that were qualified, trustworthy based upon what we believed in our decisions. And we had to give them the ability to act accordingly and make decisions in a manner that would best serve themselves and their businesses. And the amazing part about it is, after the shock and awe that came in February, March, and April of go back to 2020, I think by the time we got to the summer, people began to settle in. And as we began to settle in, we became more empathetic too. We realize that the kid's going to storm into the office, and the two working parents from home are going to be more reliant on one another for supporting each other during the course of the day. And I think that's, for many organizations, how they have adapted their workforce going forward. I don't think there's a lot of my experience, and I work with hundreds of small businesses. I don't see a large rallying cry to go back to the way it was, in terms of having a direct engagement 5 days a week, everybody in an office. I think and let me say this to you this way, whether you want to do that or not, it's generally not accepted right now. In terms of being an employer, if you want to be an employer of choice, you have to be able to offer that flexibility and give people the time that they need for their families. And look, the other part about it is, look, Zoom is a wonderful medium, and it allows you to be incredibly efficient and effective in doing so. There's no case. I could speak for me personally, but there becomes a point in time where this becomes Groundhog Day, day after day after day after day. There's no separation. You start to realize how much you appreciated just driving from your house to a train station. So employers began to realize that there's got to be some measure of mental health here. We're just going to burn everybody out to the ground. So you've had to manage it differently than in years past. It's definitely more around, an empathy, more trust, and a different style of communication, which I'm sure we'll touch on in a moment.
Well, it's great. I think it's kind of ironic that, it took such drastic change and such horrible things like a global pandemic to force the business world into what we'll call more human atmosphere, right? Where mental health and work-life balance are things that we're kind of just willing to approach differently. Yeah. But trust, I think, is an interesting, point that you started that bit with. And I think that's, well made. So I was actually, I can't say I was the first. I might've been the second or third, remote employee for corporate AV during my time out in California, in LA. And so a lot of these topics, a lot of these things were things that we had, kind of started to go through, a couple of years removed, a couple of years prior rather from the pandemic. So, to your point, trust became key, right? It was making sure that I could, still perform my job duties without somebody watching me, literally. Yeah. And I think a lot of businesses obviously just kind of went through those same thought processes. Is there a balance to, at least that you've seen, is there a balance to that trust factor versus measurement, that you kind of guide your clients on? I mean, I'm sure any, management group would want to know, like, how do we prove that everybody is working? Like, how do we quantify that output? Is there a balance to that versus also we do actually care about you as well?
Yeah. I mean, look, we all have to realize that you're given a responsibility at the time you accept your position, and the company you employs you is kind enough to offer you compensation for your efforts, right? I'm a big believer in that reciprocal relationship. I'm 23 years with the organization, and I'm still incredibly appreciative of the opportunity that I was given at a time in life when I needed it the most. Is that how many or most people carry themselves in the main manner, that they always feel that responsibility? No, and I think it's a bit. I'm a bit of a throwback in that sense. But I think what you have to begin to ask, and it's interesting, Ron, your question, and it's really centers around a lot of dialogue we're having right now, which is, as this has, in essence, drawn to some measure of a conclusion. And what employers are struggling with here, and I'm speaking specifically, and let me use the New York market, and not specifically here. I think if you're in a state that went completely shut down, California, Chicago, New York, as opposed to Texas and Florida, the employers are feeling there's a bit of a measure of being disingenuous by the employees at this point, because they're saying, look, we'd like you to come back. We'd like you to be in 2 days a week. We'd like you to be in 3 days a week. And that trust factor that the employer gave to the individual, and say, look, we trust that you're going to do your job. we're not asking you to come back to the office because we don't trust you. It's not a matter of trust. But what we realize is what we have to think about is who we are today and who we want to be in the future. And one of the things that every one of your clients and employers and relationships will tell you is this, that if you allow the next generation to continue to live in the remote world environment, right, what is lacking for them is the ability to gain greater business acumen. You learn in a collaborative environment. Joe couldn't teach the people in his business, and every aspect from installation to how to wire something to how to make it sound right. He would never be able to do that in his business if it was purely in a remote sense, right? It's a hands-on. There's a part of a hands-on engagement that comes, but part of that is getting that generation of people to come back in some manner, right? What does some manner mean? Is it 2 days a week? Is it a monthly meeting? But just the collaboration aspect of it. But the part of the success of that is, and John, I don't mean to pick on you. It's the same conversation with everybody is, I need the people that have been with me for years. They need to be there too, because they have the acumen, the experience. So, a lot of what we talk about, especially to our tenured staff, and I was on one of our clients earlier today, is what he's told his management team is, we've got to think about is what's your legacy? How do you want when your time is done, not on this earth, but with us as an organization, how do you want to be remembered? Do you want to be remembered as the person who said, no, I will never come into the office and I won't help anybody, but I gave you all the freedom that, you were afforded? I'm asking you to come in a couple of days a week, and companies are trying to do it in that manner, as opposed to saying you're required to do it, because anytime people generally told they have to do something, they generally don't want to do it. Right. So that, it becomes a matter of, I give you the trust, but I also expect something in return for it, right? In terms of an equal commitment, because it's a employment relationship is a partnership. Both parties have to benefit for it to be successful and for it to last long term.
That makes a lot of sense. I think it's really interesting, the differences that you're pointing out between the states that shut down or the cities that shut down. And of course, they're major metropolis areas too. So, which probably already have challenges with recruitment and staff. Like they probably already have those challenges to begin with before all this. But now there's like a whole new variable. And certainly that doesn't apply to every industry. Like not every industry can work from home, right?
No.
I mean, we saw that. Who were the most important people during all this? Everybody's Amazon delivery person, the food delivery person, the Stop and Shop or the supermarket person,
the healthcare worker,
cleaning, everybody cleaning, obviously the healthcare workers. Like, I mean, who's driving the buses? Who's driving the trains? How are things getting done?
Yep.
And they became the most at risk people, of course, during that time. But the point is really interesting. I mean, I think we might go in a slightly different direction because it doesn't apply to a lot of that. But even though, look at many of our people could not work, right? I mean, they need to be on site someplace and they need to be setting something up.
Sure.
Literally for groups of people that meet together.
Right.
But if there's no way to physically meet together, then we have no work.
Right. Agreed.
So the dynamic is
Joe, but let me say this: as you think about the dynamic changing, is now that the work in your industry is always been a in-person engaged. Look, same for me, right? I'm about the personal relationship. I think that's an irreplaceable aspect of being an advisor, being a consultant. Your business foundationally, core competency was having in-person events, right? The question you ask yourself is, to a degree, is have we made it, is it too easy at this point? Is it too easy to stay in that environment and comfort in that environment? But the challenge then is you lose that personal connection, right? So here's my point about when you think about recruiting. How does Joe and other business owners, I work with clients who are painting contracts. I work with companies that are machinist shops, right in Mount Kisco, a metal stamping group, right? Those are not that's not the Main Street America job at this point. That the kid who goes to college and mom and dad spend, like I have 2 kids in college right now. No disrespect to those positions, but in your mind, you talk to your kids who wants to be a fashion designer, who wants to be biochemical, who wants to do engineering. Very rarely do you sit with somebody who says, yeah, I want to go work in a metal stamping shop at this point, right? You tend to think those hourly non-exempt skilled laborers are are those that are most struggling to be filled, because there hasn't been, I talked to the group I mentioned in Mount Kisco, is a company called Zurich Manufacturing. I've been working with them, their clients of ours for many years. And Joe Turcotte is one of the principals. He said, look, we recruit at BOCES level at this point, and he said, right at the high school level, that's where we're focusing, And I said to Joe, I said, the unfortunate part of that is that are you hoping the kid doesn't go to college and you recruit him out of high school? He said, no, I'm hoping to make an impression upon him that as he goes through college and maybe realizes that a professional career isn't for him or her, that this is going to be a career path for them. But let me say this to you. Most people think that the struggling aspect is the hourly non-exempt worker. It's not. It is in every vertical of business right now where companies are struggling to track talent. And what they're having to do is focus more on the total compensation package and just be competitive on the cash compensation, because that's what's creating the difference right now. Telling somebody you've got to work 5 days in an office is excluding yourself from that consideration of many people at this point.
Mm-hmm. No, I would tend to agree, which kind of leads into this show is focused on technology and how people use technology, right? So let's take it from prior to this. How did you guys in Insperity use technology, and how do you use it now?
I mean, look,
right? Everybody's different at this point.
Yeah. So I'm going to tell you from a standpoint of, I'm going to answer it from 2 ways. I'm going to answer from a engagement standpoint, and then and we'll call it an administrative standpoint. Look, for me, and there are 700 and some odd Rons that work for Insperity in similar title around the country. And so the common engagement was in-person meetings, right? And occasionally a conference call. You would have the ability to potentially in a day, and being in a major city like New York, and call it, Atlanta and Boston would afford you the greater opportunity to see maybe 1 or 2 more people than anybody other markets because of the mass transit system. But it was direct engagement. Technology, to answer your question, other than for email, text message was not a part of our day-to-day interactions. So you take us from the world of in-person interactions into the world of, Zoom and Microsoft Teams. What did it afford? Well, it certainly made you more efficient, because now you could have a multiple of conversations. You weren't distracted by travel and travel disruptions. I can't tell you how many hours I would sit in an airport, missing flights, missing meetings. So there was a benefit to that. There's a benefit to the technology aspect in engagement with a customer, potential customer. I think the other part about it is, what I came to realize is the meetings we had before were in person and conference call. Well, what's the value of a medium such as this is that we could see people. Okay, you're not sitting in front of them, but I can get a read for who you are, your personality, your body language. Are you listening, not listening? Do you like me? Do you not like me? I mean, that's all. There's certainly a far more efficiency. Now, on the administrative side, I'll tell you this, right? When I talk to businesses today about we'll call it administration, at the forefront of questions that they're asking of us as a service organization is, do you have an applicant tracking system? Because we're always now we're always in the need to hire. I think people have gotten smart in general in saying we can't wait till we lose a performer. We must always be looking to improve the staff that we have. So an applicant tracking system allows you to keep that in a progressive manner. The next question we're always asked is learning and development. People want to be we're finding that in the interview and selection process, people are asking consistently, what is your organization's commitment to training and development? Well, think about it. Many of us joined the organizations we work for, there's a formalized training program, right? The company would spend time and dollars and resources to teach you about the company, its culture, its product. Well, if nobody's together anymore, well, then what do? We stop training and develop. So we need a learning and development platform. And the last part of it is about performance. It goes back to what Ryan asked before, a little bit about trust and how do I measure trust and am I getting the performance? Well, historically, business owners provided an employee a performance review, typically once every 364 days, right? And that people have come to realize, number one, that wasn't a very prudent way to manage performance because too much went by from the last time we spoke to this moment. And at that point, I'm begrudgingly completing the performance review because I have to do it. The other part about it is what does and I speak to some degree, the next generation is what do they want? They want constant communication. They want an understanding of where they are, what their role, what the response, what the opportunity is for them. So technology, from an HR administration standpoint, I use the term HRIS system, human resource information system. That's no longer effective enough. That just does basic administration. What people need now is an HCM platforms, human capital management, because you're managing your people in a different way because of what's occurred in terms of the shift in how the workplace looked. You're also being in a medium of how people more or commonly want to be and enjoy communicating. They'd rather have an electronic communication for the most part than have a direct conversation. And you tend to find you can have more candid conversations with more direct results than having a conversation where people who may not be comfortable having a direct conversation.
A lot of well-made points there. I honestly touched on a lot of different things. I mean, from applicant tracking, training and development, performance tracking, and then general communication. I'm sure there's a lot to each of those individual, categories, if you want to call them that, where technology is kind of manifesting in new ways. We'll call it in the post-pandemic era. Is there anything that you can point to? This may be a tough question, but is there anything you can point to inside those categories that is more or less a recent development because of the new challenges that businesses are facing that maybe is only a Band-Aid, that maybe they're like, as soon as we can get away from this? I mean, we talked about asking people to come back into the office, but are there anything inside of those categories you're speaking to?
Kind of short-term
technology. Yeah, it's more of a short-term solution than a long-term, plan, or our business is thinking of it that way. Like, hey, no, actually this works and let's keep it around. Or are there anything that seems destined to end?
I'm going to tell you in each of the components that I touched on, I'm going to say no, emphatically no. I don't see that it has a shelf life that was, do I believe Zoom will have as many users and, whatever their profits are and they'll give adjusted guidance? Yeah, I've left my house a little bit more frequently in the last several weeks than I did if I looked at it on a per capita basis or per day basis in the last 2 years. But I think, you begin to think about how businesses operate and can operate more efficiently, right? And again, it's the dollars they spend on travel and what can be eliminated in just a first conversation. The first conversation in a medium like this and the expense you're cutting down on travel and flights and home. Again, the appeal of travel isn't as great anymore. Again, putting pandemic aside, it's now like, well, I got to leave my home for 3 days. I'm accustomed to being here. It's not the same appeal isn't there. So do I think of any of the ones that I touched on where there could be some measure of fall off in user activity? It may be in this ever so slightly. Do I think for the purpose of HR administration and compliance that platforms like training and development and organizational development? Absolutely not, because a lot of what I'm sharing with you is generational. And as that generation continues to get younger and younger, and again, I'm 50, so I'm the older generation. You're finding that the technology is let me say it to you this way. anytime I get introduced to an organization in today's day and time, one of the first aspects and critical aspects as to whether we have an alignment, right, is my technology. They want to know three things. Is it user-friendly? Is it intuitive? And is it scalable? And the scalable is the critical piece, because at the end of the day, what people don't want to buy is a platform, no matter what your platform is, that has an obsolescence to it. And that's the one thing I try to convey. I'm sure anyone who's in a SaaS business tries to convey. They say, look, I understand what your needs are right now, but what you don't want to buy is a system that's going to limit you your needs now, because things change and your needs will develop to others. Don't, because you're going to spend, it's kind of like we used an Oracle-based platform for our CRM system internally at Insperity called One Voice. We're in a 2-year transition to Salesforce now. Let me say it this way. We're only with the Oracle-based software probably for about 5 to 6 years. Was it the right decision? It was the right decision for the moment. But now you have something that's, the standard in the industry for CRM, and you're spending millions. So again, you have to think about it. Technology is something that's always evolving, and you'll never have something that's all the way in front of where the market's going. But to go back to your Ryan, if you said to me, applicant tracking is not important to me right now, that's fine. But don't limit yourself that you remove that ability, because you may need it in the future.
Yeah, no, I mean, technology is always evolving. We think about that literally every single day. So, which part of us, we're saying, Rob, we're talking about the warehouse full of equipment, right? In 2 years, do you know what happens with equipment in 2 years?
Right.
Well, it's not good stuff,
right?
So because you don't want to start up again and then be obsolete. Like it's like like you're behind the 8 ball already. But that technology aside, we're talking about labor shortages. Now, in our particular world, there was a lot of people that literally left the industry because they had to.
Right.
They literally had to. They couldn't wait 2 years to support their families or, to live their lives. And now as we're ramping up, of course, we're seeing a shortage of our skilled in our world people, and I know that a lot of other people, everyone in hospitality is going through the same thing.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the stamping group in Mount Kisco and how they're going to the BOCES level, and they're recruiting out of high school theoretically. I mean, what are you seeing other groups doing that might be good ideas for people?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're seeing consistently is more what we call peer-to-peer reliance, right? So, your individual employees, if you're a good employer and you treat your employees fair and you give, you're fair. I'm not saying you have to be egregious to them, but you recognize that we've changed in a lot of ways as a society, over the last several years. I think we've become more compassionate, in terms of how we feel about an individual. And then, we need the work, but we also respect there's a balance to it, and that there are other parts of your life that are going to take precedent. We know that if an employer has a good feeling, they're more inclined to do two things. They're more inclined to speak outwardly for you. I'm of the belief that your employees you could spend all the money you want on marketing, but the people who work for you, they're your best and or worst marketing resource that you have. If you don't treat them well, if they don't feel respected, if they feel they're beholden to certain standards that cannot be obtained, then they're going to outwardly speak out against you. And I can say this to you, staying in the world of technology, is social media as a medium is as good as it could be to reach a consumer. If you're measuring cost acquisition in the most efficient manner in terms of how do we reach to the dollar we spend, it can kill you as well. A lot of times when I talk to companies in advance of a conversation, I'll go on Glassdoor. And Glassdoor will tell you, it's truthful. It may not be what an employer wants to hear about how they're perceived, about the experience of being an employee at that company. But let me assure you, people utilize that to make a determination. So going to your question, Joe, about your people, we see a lot of peer-to-peer recruiting within our clients, creating incentive programs. Hey, look, we'd like, if you have individuals that are within your your alumni association, that are within your peer group that could benefit a career from this organization. They're relying less on executive recruiters. Nobody wants to be sold on somebody. I always tell folks, look, executive recruiters, I understand they're going to fulfill a need for a position, but keep in mind that those people in that space they're in a sales capacity. So you want to rely on your clients, the people that you trust in your network. I always believe that the people that in your network as business leaders. Whether it's your CPA, whether it's your lawyer, whether it's your investment banker, whether it's your priest, rabbi, shaman, whatever your faith is, your spouse, it's the power of a referral in any aspect of both from a business opportunity or employee is so more powerful. I think it's speaking to people that are within your trusted network are going to be the most effective in finding you quality people.
It's super interesting as far as the points you're touching on. I think I can speak for everybody on this call that we have a bit of a sales background. So, some more than others. I don't know. There we go. Nailed it. But in any case, it sounds like a lot of the strategies for talent acquisition, especially in this era, are one and the same with sales strategies for selling your product.
Yeah.
Is that a new concept? Because it feels new, and yet at the same time, I wonder, all right, well, sales strategies have changed in the last 5 years. So is it just that talent acquisition was lagging behind?
Yeah, I think here's I'm going to answer your question. And I'm not big on short answers, right? But think about this. Do I want to hire, do I want the person who's looking for the job, or do I want the person who's looking for the career? And when you think about looking for the job, you'll selfishly fill your need as an employer. You will fill the need. But what you have to ask yourself is, am I fulfilling what that person's needs are? Because if I'm not, then it's the carousel, right? We talk about the role earlier, right, about the internal HR person. One of the highest areas of attrition that we see in a small to medium-sized business, and everyone who would be part of this call will attest to this, is that individual in that role who is hired to take on responsibilities from C-level executives. But that individual, it's not, if they're a professional and they're degreed and they invested their time in learning their craft, that's the most unfulfilling position to be in a small business. We see it constantly, because what they don't do is they went to school to become about HR strategy and HR development and succession planning. But what are they doing? They're doing unemployment claims, workers' comp, because Joe and Ryan don't want to do it anymore. So that poor gentleman or that poor young lady, they leave. And we see it. We see it all the time. So again, here's what I'm going to say to you, try to tie it together. I think the person who goes to the market in today's time to look for a candidate, number one, has to really be selfless. We all need talent. I'm going to tell you, we're as desperate as any organization in the country now to hire. We have requisitions throughout the United States in service positions and in sales and business development positions, right? We don't want to be in a position where we feel relevant to the employee's job responsibility. And what we've recognized is the learning and development path to overpay for talent just to kind of, to grab somebody at that level. So we want to try to do, we tell our district managers is, we need you to be selfless. We need you to think about it from a standpoint. We know you have a responsibility, but if you think about, number one is listen to what that person is looking for. People, like-minded people stay together. You meet your friends and your family and your business associates. You're going to find other people. You're going to find other people that are affiliated and associated to those people. They'll create opportunities for you. But Ryan, let me say it this way: it all, and to tie this thought together, it all has become a movement from let's work 1 million hours. Try to make as much money as we can. Which, listen, there are certain people that have that mentality. But there's more of an understanding that, we need to respect what other people's needs are and not just our own as business leaders. what I'm finding is the companies that can do that are becoming great companies, great organizations, because they've got a culture where people want to be there. They're looking for you. You don't have to look for them. They know who you are. They know who you are. And let me say this: it does not have to be the Googles and the Amazons of the world. I see it I tell you one last story and we'll stop. And Joe met this gentleman, Mike DiMarino from Linda Tool, a tool and die shop in Brooklyn. When I first started working for this company, Mike was one of the first organizations that we engaged as a client. We used to have IT people in our offices. I remember I was on the phone with Michael and David, who was the IT guy, said, "Hey, let me ask you a question. That gentleman on the phone, is that Mike DiMarino of Linda Tool?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I know him." He said, "My friend worked for him. He said he was the greatest person he ever worked for." I mean, when you hear that, you have somebody can outwardly speak in that manner, it's going to help you find the right talent that's career focused.
That's pretty awesome. The fact, it's funny that you mentioned, you're talking about the references and peer-to-peer, and obviously if you're doing the right things, you're creating a right environment for people, and they're going to want to stay there and they want to be a part of that. We've always felt like there's this kind of a certain profile of people that tend to like working with us and succeed long term. Yeah. And look, we didn't always know those things.
No,
we had to learn them the hard way, just like everybody else. And it evolves, of course. Each group of people tends to evolve, a little bit.
Yep.
And from a small business perspective, one person can make all the difference.
Oh, no question.
In a culture, in a good way or a bad way.
Yep.
And so you really got to find the right people. I mean, that's the hardest part.
100%.
So you are forced to fill some roles sometimes. There's
Absolutely.
no way around it.
Well, listen, you have work that's presented to you. If somebody came along and said, "Joe, hey, listen, we've got it." Does Joe sit down and say, "I'm going to walk away from the opportunity"? No, you fill the job. But a lot of times when we're having conversations about people and their commitment and performance, the question I ask my team is two things. Is it an aptitude issue or is it an attitude issue? If it's an aptitude issue, then we really have the responsibility. And it's been a hard responsibility in a remote environment to develop people, because you're not seeing them and you're not with them and we're doing the best that we can and from a communication standpoint and a development standpoint, right? And it's an attitude issue to what Joe's talking about. A negative attitude in a small group of people can be demonstrative. It's easy to become, especially if that person is, an A player on the team, and all of a sudden they're disenchanted because they lost a revenue on the largest client that left the firm. But that person selfishly understands what's the impact of Joe's business. Joe still has to run his business, so he's going to make less money. But what happens to Joe? You want the people that are aligned with you on that team and say, "Okay, I understand and I empathize with Joe, and Joe empathizes with me, but we're here for the greater good together."
I think that's what you're always hoping for.
You hope for, right.
That's what you're always hoping for.
Mm-hmm.
But listen, Ron, I think you could probably talk for 3 more days. So we're gonna have to put you on an end cap here. We're good.
We're good.
I know
it was great.
I know
it
you
was
got
fun.
stuff
I hope there was something meaningful that came out of it.
There's actually been lots of things.
Good.
But listen, we're going to kick you backstage here for a minute and come back to you while Brian and I wrap up our show here. So, Ron, hang in there. We'll come back to you in a minute.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your patience.
Thanks, Ron.
All right.
Oh, cut him off. There we go.
Man, you didn't have to cut him off. I mean,
as the big hook, right? Even that's changed in the post-pandemic world, right?
I know. Before you'd have to have like a really big person to move someone, but now you just hit a button. I mean,
an itchy trigger finger, right?
So was it accidental or on purpose, Ryan? To be determined.
Is it attitude or aptitude, huh?
Well, I think that's a really good point, though. I mean, aptitude or attitude is certainly a discussion that everybody has to have. The peer-to-peer references and recruiting, I think I know from our standpoint, we've always looked at that to be much more successful.
Right.
But not every business has gone about it like that. And so I think these are really great words of advice.
Yeah. And, it does seem too like at least in the, current term, and really looking at the broad view, right, is being a great company has a direct relationship with being great to work for, right? And that as far as talent acquisition, unfortunately, someone's got to buy what you're selling, right?
Well, I mean, how many times did we talk about trust in this conversation?
Yeah,
it's pretty big.
Absolutely.
That's pretty big. And I think it's also very hard to do. And I think after these 2 years, it's hard to do probably on both sides. And so you really got to match up well, and you got to find people that, that want to be there and working with you. But this, I thought it was a great conversation.
Likewise.
I know I learned a lot. Maybe I'll get better at this, or maybe I'll just turn it over to you. I like that part. Maybe I'll turn it over to you. All right, Ryan, listen, let's move this show along. Why don't you tell everybody how they can come and watch this, and maybe even rewatch this?
That's right. Rewatch it. Well, and you know what? Actually, we got to add another banner to this thing. I'm going to tack one on at the end here. Well, I'll tell you about it in a second. So you can find us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. All of those are live every Wednesday, 1:00. Come on back. The replay will also be posted there. So you can catch all this conversation after the fact. While you're there, you can drop us a comment. You can like, you can comment, you can share, and you can subscribe, all the above. It is very much appreciated. And of course, again, this is Wednesdays, 1 p.m. We're going to do this every week, or most weeks. We're going to go for every week in 2022. And again, 1:00 is when we start. That's 1:00 Eastern, right? For our friends. We're international now. I mean, you were speaking on an event in Poland, so we got to let people know.
You mean this event?
Look at that tee up. Wow. It's like I knew you were ready for it. Oh, my gosh. Wow.
That's
great.
Good.
Well, there you go.
And by the way, if I could just add one thing,
go ahead.
We've been in a lot of communication with our friends in Poland recently because of all that's going on in their neighboring country of Ukraine.
Yeah.
So those relationships from one event have now turned into a much bigger relationship over time.
Absolutely. Well, and now I kind of feel guilty going back the other direction, but we do have to add one more banner, and that is, you can now find these bite-sized clips. You're going to see more and more of these posted on our social channels, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, but also on Instagram. We might even get into Twitter, who knows. But just to be able to come away a little quicker with some of the great parts of these conversations, that is something that we're going to be doing a lot more of in the coming weeks and months. So stay tuned. And look at that. There you go. Now it's ready.
I put bit size. I was so close. So close.
Well, look, we'll get them next week. How's that?
We'll fix it for next time. Ryan, thank you very much. Ron, thank you very much. Mr. Finch, take us out of here.
All right. Bye now.